actually started at LV Lomas about a month apart from one another, and we're sitting right beside each other when we started. And our careers have really developed along the way together. So she's currently the sales manager for our Ontario food team, and we still work together quite closely. So I might encourage her to participate in questions and answers as we go on. So thank you very much for the introduction. A lot of this I was going to cover, so it's a little bit repetitious, but I'll go over what Kenny had said. So I really want to highlight my own connections with BASF. So as Kenny mentioned, LV Lomas is a specialty chemical distributor in the Canadian marketplace for more than 60 years. Our business model is really around partnering with the best manufacturers in the industry and then being their channel partner into the Canadian marketplace. So we've represented BASF for many years in the pharmaceutical excipients, and then we're representing for surfactants, and I believe we also have vitamins for animal health now. So as Kenny mentioned, we were acquired in 2017 by IMCD, which is a global specialty chemical distributor. And so we just changed the name of the company in September from LV Lomas to IMCD Canada, but I'll definitely, it's hard to outgrow that Lomas name, and it creeps into conversations all the time. The funniest thing was when I first was leaving voicemails, and that micro pause when you say, "Hi, it's Kris Rogers from IMCD." It takes a little while to undo that. So when I joined, I was in this commercial support role known as a technical marketing coordinator. So my job is really to coordinate the incoming requests from the sales team and then work with people like Kenny and our principal partners to make sure that we're growing the business of our principals strategically in a way that is successful for the both of us. So at that time, I was working very closely with a manager of mine named Valerie McCoy. And so Valerie actually worked for BASF for 20 years prior to joining LV Lomas. So it all comes full circle. And Valerie's been a great mentor to me even today in my career. So I had this role as a commercial support person, and then I eventually moved out into our sales team. On the pharma side of things. So then I was selling BASF ingredients like Coladon and Colifor, and Kenny and I were working together a lot more closely at that time. So it was Kenny who nominated me for this Women in Business session, and when Christina reached out to me, I thought, no, that sounds terrible. I don't want to do that. Like, what on earth would I have to say to a group of people that, like, what I wasn't sure how I would contribute, but I actually thought of Valerie, who would encourage me to do this and push myself outside of my comfort zone. So I thought, okay, I can do this. So this has been an interesting thing to sort of review on the insights that I've gained in my career, and then it's an opportunity to sort of give back. I've gotten a lot of great advice over the years, so hopefully I'll say something that resonates with someone today. So I actually started my career working in a research lab. So I worked for a small biotech startup developing antibodies to treat cancer. So I have a biology and chemistry degree from the University of Waterloo. And when I was graduating, I didn't even know there were other jobs outside of working in a lab. Like, I really thought that was the only thing that was open to me. So the company I worked for, the science was really cool. So what they would do is they would take human tumor tissue and they would immunize mice, and then the mice would develop antibodies to fight the cancer cells. And so then they would isolate the cells, grow those up in tissue culture, and then test the antibodies to see which ones were effective at actually reducing the size of human tumors. So it was pretty cool, but you can't take a mouse antibody and give it to a human. You'll have an allergic response to that. So my job in the molecular biology lab was to actually make these mouse antibodies more human-like. So I was doing cloning and all types of things that I had gone to school to learn, and it was really exciting. The challenge with it was every day I was just kind of going to the lab by myself, like in my own little room, doing what seemed to be the same experiments over and over again. It was a very small company, so there was only about 20 people working there, and I found myself just sort of talking to the same 20 scientists day in and day out. And after a little while, I realized maybe this didn't really align with my personality type. You can probably tell I'm a bit of a social person, and I was maybe looking for something a little bit more. Also, the financial situation of the company was a little precarious. So after being there for 4 years, I took a year off on maternity leave when I had my son Riley. And when I was coming back, I was really reevaluating on whether I wanted to go back to the same company. The company was for sale as well, which kind of made it a little bit more uncertain. So I started looking around for another job, and I went on my alumni website and saw this posting for Albulomas. I had no idea what the company was or what they did, but met the people, and everybody was really nice, great culture. And I remember during the interview, one of the VPs saying to me, so what's your 5-year career goal? And I was honestly thinking, I don't know, like to be employed. So I really was just looking for a company that was stable, financially stable, because that's what I was lacking, that was a little bit closer to home for me, and that would hire me. That was it. So the VP, he said to me, well, the reason I ask is because this role that we're hiring for is known as the farm team for sales. And again, it was one of those moments where I was like, sales? No, I hate salespeople. My only experience with salespeople up to that point had been sort of these pesky salespeople who were selling lab reagents that would just kind of wander into the lab when no one invited them, and everyone would try to sort of avoid them. And I had this perception of what a salesperson was, and I wanted nothing to do with it. So then I started at the job, and then actually started working with salespeople and realized, oh, that's not actually what this is. They're actually working with their customers, and they're helping them solve problems and understand what the issues are and overcome that. And my role was to help the salespeople help the customers. So the irony of the whole thing is I came from a company that was literally trying to cure cancer, maybe not cure cancer, but find an effective treatment for cancer. And then I moved to a chemical distribution company where I actually felt that it was helping people more on a day-to-day basis than in my previous job. So so that's just, I always found that somewhat interesting. So I was in this job for a couple of years, and then as time went on, I thought, you know what, maybe I want to be a salesperson. So I really just kind of put my head down and learned everything that I could to prepare me for that. So I learned everything that I could about our products and the industries that we were involved in. I started taking some courses on selling skills, reading a lot of books, and then my opportunity came when one of our sales reps was going on maternity leave. So when I found out that she was pregnant, I was not shy at all about letting her manager and HR manager and anybody who would listen to me that I really wanted this opportunity. And so I can remember having a discussion with our VP, Devin Chan, and he said very explicitly that if I was selected for this role, this was a temporary job. You know, this is maternity leave coverage, so when Beth comes back, you will be not staying in outside sales, you'll be returning to your previous role. And I said, okay, yes, understood. And then walked out of his office and immediately thought, well, that just means I have a year to be awesome and really knock their socks off. It's sales, right? So if I can demonstrate what I can do for the organization, they'll really have no choice but to keep me in outside sales. And that's actually what ended up happening. So I spent a couple years with our pharma team, I did a little stint in our personal care team, and then eventually moved over into our food team, which is I'm still a part of today. And so now I'm managing a team of 13 commercial support staff, so the same role that Shannon and I started out with among some other folks. And then I'm also a principal manager, which means I'm responsible for the relationship with some of our food principals and making sure that we execute on their strategy to grow business together. So Christina had asked me to describe, how did I move from a job in the lab to managing people? And for me, it was really just about sort of setting my sights on the next job, like not the end game necessarily, but the next job that really suited my personal interests more than anything else. And then investing in the skills that I needed to get there. So when I wanted to move into sales, I took courses on selling skills, I read lots of books, I went out on sales calls with our existing sales team so I could sort of see what it was really like. When I wanted to move towards managing people, I once again read everything that I could on the subject. I started volunteering for cross-functional teams within the organization, which was really great at building relationships across the organization, as well as giving me the opportunity to step up and take ownership for tasks. I had a sales manager who once told me, there are many opportunities in your day-to-day work life that present the opportunity to step forward as a leader. You don't actually need a formalized leadership role to be a leader. And so I thought that was a great piece of advice that I've actually given to many of the younger people that I talk to now, and I still think really applies. So how did I get there? There's really no magic to it other than initiative and hard work. And then another thing that really helped me was support of my mentor. So Valerie was always great at giving me advice and telling me, giving me options of what types of things I could possibly focus on at the right time. And that really helped me to get where I wanted to go. So in 2014, my family went through some significant changes that sort of mixed everything up. So my son Riley was about 7 years old, and I was really the primary caregiver for him. I was the one who would drop him off for before and after school care, and if he was sick, I was the one that would stay home with him. That was really, my husband Tom, he worked at a steel tubing mill. So he worked a really hard job, so 10-hour days, production environment, an hour commute each way. So he didn't really have the flexibility that I did to help out with our son. So that was also made things a little bit difficult if I had to travel for work, which I did on occasion. So Winnipeg was part of my territory, so every month or so I was gone for a few days, or I would go for training, like to New Jersey, to BASF, to learn more about the products. Things like that would come up. And whenever that came up, we had to rely on my in-laws. They would have to come stay with us because my husband left so early. He'd be out of the house at 6 a.m. We couldn't even get our son to book for school care. So it was a bit of a challenge, and it was a little limiting in the extra stuff that I could take on, and always had to be really mindful of the family situation in order to balance out the work stuff that I had going on. So Tom had really been hating his job for a number of years. The company had, frankly, a complete disregard for workplace safety, and it was a dangerous environment, and injuries were quite common, and they had actually had a few more severe incidents that had attracted the attention of the Ministry of Labor. And he was a supervisor, so he was the one who was dealing with us on a regular basis. And it was at that time that he explained to me that the Ontario regulations around that, so as a supervisor, he would personally be held responsible if there was a serious injury or a death on his watch. So in addition to having to live with that, he would actually be subject to huge fines and potentially jail time. And so when I realized the severity of this, it's like, okay, we got to do something. So we agreed that it was time for him to leave. And so my own career at that point, I was the strategic account manager for food business. And we'd actually reached a point where financially we were probably able to survive on a single income. But the caveat to that was we'd have to make some adjustments to our living situation. So it was one of those moments where you have to decide what's really important, like the well-being of your family or your material possessions. So it was a no-brainer. We put the house up for sale and we just moved to a different real estate market where your dollar goes a lot further. And then he was able to leave his job and then actually become a stay-at-home dad and spend that time with Riley that he had missed when he was really young. So that was a big change, and it actually supported my career in two important ways. So one, that traveling limitation and not being able to go out for dinners and relationship building and things like that kind of went away and really allowed me the ability to focus on the job at hand and dig in a little bit deeper. And then the other one was it created the opportunity for me to start my MBA in a part-time program. So this is something I'd wanted to do for a few years, but I just had given up on it because I was like, because when am I going to have time to do that? So with Tom at home, that really sort of gave us the space, and it was him. He brought it up and said, well, maybe you can do this. Okay, maybe I can do this. So it took me 4 years to get through the part-time program at DeGroote McMaster. And Valerie was another one who really encouraged me to do this. She probably put the idea in my head because she had done a similar thing in her own career. So she had a young family at home, was working full-time, traveling probably quite a bit more than I was, and decided that she was going to do a part-time MBA. And she said the value of it was really that it changes the way you think. And it took me a little while to sort of understand what that meant. But when I thought about it, at this point I had sort of already been identified as a future leader for the organization, but I had a science degree. Like, I knew nothing about business. Everything that I'd learned about business, I had learned within the four walls of Lomas. And I thought, well, how am I going to be a leader if I don't have any outside knowledge? So the combination of Tom's support and then the support of the organization, I started my MBA and actually graduated in April of this year. And people would often ask me, like, how can you do it all? And the answer is, I didn't do it all. I really could not have done this without the support of Tom, and I think that it's really important to rely on the support of the people around you. All right. So now on to that's me. Now on to the women in business stuff. Honestly, it had never even occurred to me that being a woman in business might somehow be a liability until someone pointed out to me, an old sales manager of ours. She gave me a book called Lean In by Sheryl Sandberg. And it wasn't until I read that I was like, oh yeah, maybe there's more to it. And so when I read that book, there was a lot of things that resonated with me. The first being that women, a lot of times we are our own worst enemy, and that we hold ourselves back. Sheryl Sandberg talks about taking a seat at the table and then having the confidence to really speak up and make sure that your voice is heard. And often we're the ones limiting ourselves. She talks about the imposter syndrome, and that really resonated with me as well. How sometimes you just feel like, oh my God, what if they find out that I don't actually know what I'm talking about and I'm going to be exposed for the fraud that I am? But it was great to read that I'm not the only one who feels like that. Really, everyone feels like that sometimes. Amy Cuddy's another one who's spoken about it a lot. And she does the power pose, the Wonder Woman thing, how your body language helps you overcome that. But whatever tools you need, it's so important to just overcome that and make sure that you're participating in the conversations at hand and not holding yourself back. Another key point from the book that really resonates with me, which you can probably pick up on, is the support from your partner, which was really evident from when I started my MBA. So Sandberg says that in families where both parents work full-time, the mother does about 40% more childcare and 30% more housework than the father. And I would say, in my own experience, that was probably the case for us. So Tom didn't have the flexibility in his job, so that was part of it. But the other part of it was me sort of conforming to what I thought the role of a woman was in the household. Not that he was necessarily asking me to do that, but I was just stepping up and taking on more than my fair share because I thought that that's what this was. So we were fortunate enough to get this opportunity to sort of reset that. And then when he became a stay-at-home dad, he definitely took on way more than his fair share. He pretty much took on all of it, and I'm still quite spoiled today. But I think that it would be great for younger generations to sort of approach this with a little bit more forethought and being a little bit more equitable in the share of the workload for, you know, raising kids and taking care of the house and cooking and cleaning and all that good stuff ahead of time. So Sandberg also says in the book that fathers actually make up only 4% of parents who work full-time in the home, which shows that it's a bit of a rarity. Interestingly enough, Shannon has a 16-month-old son, and her husband stays home with him full-time. So we definitely always joke that Tom's been a bit of a role model for Tyler. But honestly, there's a lot of social stigma that goes around with that, and so Tom would be the butt of jokes from his friends, for sure. I would always say, yeah, because they're jealous. But, you know, my parents didn't really understand this, so you don't really realize that there's a lot of stigma, and I think that we could all do a better job of being supportive of families that decide that, you know, that's the best choice for them. So when it comes to women in leadership roles, one of the key learnings that I gained from my MBA was the value of diversity, which I'm very pleased to hear is one of the core values for BASF. So I would say organizations for far too long have been run by old white guys. So they say that in the Fortune 500 companies, less than 5% of CEOs of those companies are women. And it's a similar statistic for people from minority populations. And I just think that's such a shame that we're losing out on that opportunity for diversity of opinion and just, I don't know, the decision making that comes out of that. So I really believe that collaboration leads to better outcomes than any single individual could achieve on their own. I had a professor who would say, no one of us is as good as all of us. And I really think that's true. I think about how many times I've been invited to a meeting to solve some problem, whatever it is. And I have an idea, and then you get to the meeting and other people have completely different ideas, but then you discuss it and go back and forth, and then the resulting idea is much better than any one individual could have come up with on their own. So that including people with diverse, you know, backgrounds, experiences, ethnicities, people from different departments, men, women, I think that really benefits organizations, and that's not just sort of my thought. It's actually been proven by a lot of studies. And so I actually think that there's a lot of talk right now with respect to millennials in the workplace, and I think that's an interesting opportunity because certainly at Lomas we have a lot of really smart young individuals, and I think that you know, those demographics, they tend to be a little bit more confident and a little bit more willing to speak their mind, and that's a great opportunity to have a different perspective included in the decision-making process. So we can all contribute to this by inviting people to participate in our meetings from you know, diverse backgrounds, by considering people who are different than us when we're making hiring decisions or promotion decisions, and then going beyond that, making sure that we actively encourage participation. Sometimes you'll never believe this, but I take over a conversation and at a meeting sometimes too. But it's really important that if you're inviting somebody to come and maybe they're a little bit more of an introvert, that you take the time to encourage and makes time and space for them to participate in the conversation. So I was also thinking about some of the challenges that I faced related to being a woman at work. and stories that I've heard from friends and colleagues. And I actually think that sometimes the feminine image can be used against us, which is really too bad. So last week I was talking to a colleague of mine, and she was telling me about her experience at a previous employer. And so Kelly is like in her mid-30s, beautiful, and she's short and quite curvy, striking eyes. She's really, really smart. So she worked at this lab job, and she said that, you know, for a couple of years, she kept doing this great science and she kept asking to be the one to be able to present the results, like in meetings and conferences, and they kept turning her down and not letting her participate in that way. And she didn't really understand it, so she asked a male colleague of hers, like, what's going on here? And he quite candidly said to her, Kelly, you're too smart, you're too pretty. Nobody actually believes you're smart, which is terrible. So, but she had a good attitude about it, and she, with her love of the scientific method, decided she's gonna test this experiment. So she actually dyed her hair from blonde to brown, completely changed her wardrobe, and she made a joke about pleated khakis. And just was dressing a lot more mousy, you'll say, and stopped wearing makeup. And within 2 months, she had been promoted and was finally invited to participate and present her own results. Which, you know, that's a bit of an anecdote there, but you know, she believes that really demonstrates how her own image was working against her. I was actually talking to Shannon about this, and she said that somebody had given her a book about, you know, young women starting their career, and there was a piece of advice in the book that said that women should actually keep their hair short so that they don't stand out. And she was so ticked off, she put the book on the shelf and never picked it up again, because it's just preposterous, right? I was thinking about my own experience. And for those of you on the phone who can't tell, I'm quite tall, so I'm about 5'9", and for years I always wore flats because I was really self-conscious about how tall I was. But then as time went on, I just thought, first of all, I'm tired of wearing these ugly shoes, and second of all, like if someone feels uncomfortable about my height, it's not because I'm tall, it's because they're short. So it's all about perspective. The interesting thing about that is my boss is not very shy at telling me he doesn't like it when I wear heels. So he will regularly tell me that, and he says, you know, it's just a power thing. That's why you want to be so tall. And I think, you know, that's a real shame. It's not a power thing. It's that I want nice footwear. So, you know, all of this is, it's somewhat foolish, but really, I think it's this perception of image. It's really unfair and old-fashioned. You look at what business wear is for women, a lot of times it's just like slightly more feminine versions of a man's suit. And we shouldn't be restricted to that. And women, we're the worst too. Like, we're really judgy of one another. So I think that it's important to keep that stuff in mind, and that we shouldn't be so judgmental. We should really be supportive of one another and encouraging to celebrate who we are as women. Okay, so I'm going to circle back now to summarize some of the key insights here. What I've discovered in my career to date. So the first is really to trust in yourself. Confidence is such a critical part of success, and although, you know, all of us at times feel like we're an imposter, we just really need to find ways to push past that and make sure you're participating and believe that you deserve to be where you are. You very likely worked hard and have gained a ton of knowledge along the way, so just own that and trust in your ability to sit at the table, as it were. The second is mentorship. So I think that we all need mentors to help guide us through our careers and give us advice at the right time. So the guidelines for a mentor is just really someone that you have a natural affinity for. Like, I think of me and Valerie, we just kind of found each other. We just hit it off. and somebody who has more experience than you. And I think that it's best when it's an impartial party, or in other words, not your boss. It doesn't necessarily need to be someone within your own organization, but someone who sort of can understand the challenges that you're facing and help guide you to get where you want to go. So both men and women benefit from mentors of either sex, and often the mentor benefits with this relationship, what they gain from the mentee. So it's not like a one-sided professional relationship at all. I recently read an article that said that there's an unfortunate side effect of the Me Too movement, and that men are withdrawing from wanting to mentor young women for fear that they might be wrongly accused or what have you. And I think that's a real shame, but can be overcome by just sort of setting some ground rules of how that relationship, how they interact with one another, and hopefully that's just like a fleeting side effect of that situation. So I've been fortunate enough to have two great mentors so far. So in Valerie, who I've mentioned, and then later in Kevin Russell, who is the president of Lomas. So the relationship was really built on the occasional lunch meeting and just the understanding that we could be candid with one another and bounce ideas off one another. In the case of Kevin, he was famous for, he read a lot, and he would always leave me articles and things like that he had read in my mailbox, and then we would have the opportunity to talk about it afterwards, which was really great. So today I actually feel the need to sort of repay those relationships that I've had, and mentoring more junior employees. So I have a young lady in our marketing department that I'm currently mentoring, and I think that it's important for organizations to invest in these programs. However, it's not a requirement. Certainly that's something that anyone could do. It's just a matter of finding an individual that really resonates with you and just reaching out, and you can certainly do it without a formalized program at an organization. Another lesson is the need for men to support the career aspirations of their partners by taking on their fair share of parenting and household chores, and to build on that we should all move away from this old-fashioned idea that it's only women who could possibly stay at home and raise the children. So I could not have achieved what I have in my career if not for the support of my husband, Tom. And I hope that families everywhere can kind of find ways to continue to build the right balance for both partners, so that you can support your family life and your work life. Some other lessons include the value of diversity, which you've mentioned, and that organizations will really realize better outcomes when they encourage a variety of ages, experiences, ethnicities, and perspectives to participate in the decision-making process. The importance of continuing education, and I don't necessarily mean that everyone should go back to school in their 30s. I just mean, continuing to invest by reading whatever that is, reading books or trade publications, or participating in trade events, or taking courses either online or in person. There's just so much access to information. There really is no excuse to not be continuing to develop either the skills that you need for the job that you have right now, or the skills that you'll need for the next step of where you want to go. I actually have spent a lot of time listening to audiobooks. As an outside sales rep, you spend an insane amount of time in your car, and it's great time to just sort of read a book. My husband makes fun of me all the time. I said, I was reading, he said, you weren't reading. And audiobooks too, podcasts too. There's just an endless amount of content out there that can keep you up to date with thought leaders in the areas of interest, or even just current events. So I would encourage people to that's a lifelong thing, to continue to learn and consume information there. And then, and finally, that it's okay to be a woman and to dress like a woman and to celebrate your femininity instead of hiding from it. So that's all I've got prepared for today, and I hope somebody found something in there interesting and open to any questions you may have.